they really are robots. So this is 11 honors. We're reading Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and again, naturalism is a philosophy that shows that man is limited by environment and nature and nurture, environment and birth. You know, he's had very few. He's controlled by forces beyond his control. So here's an occurrence at Owl Creek. I will start. I'll read a couple of paragraphs, and we should be able to do it before we leave. I hope so. It's Civil War era, I'll tell you that much, in the South. All right, here we go. A man stood upon a railroad bridge in northern Alabama, looking down into the swift water 20 feet below. The man's hands were behind his back, the wrists bound with a cord. A rope closely encircled his neck. It was attached to a stout cross timber above his head, and the slack fell to the level of his knees. Some loose boards laid upon the sleepers supporting the metals of the railway supplied his footing for him and his executioners. 2 private soldiers of the Federal Army, directed by a sergeant who in civilian life had been a deputy sheriff. At a short remove upon the same temporary platform was an officer in the uniform of his rank, armed. He was a captain. The sentinel at each end of the bridge stood with his rifle in position known as support. That is to say, vertical in front of the left shoulder, the hammer resting on the forearm, thrown straight across the chest. A formal and unnatural position, enforcing an erect carriage of the body. It did not appear to be the duty of these 2 men to know what was occurring at the center of the bridge. They merely blockaded the 2 ends of the foot planking that traversed it. You get the picture? What's happening here? What would we call such an event? He's standing on a bridge with a noose around his neck. But what are they going to do?
Hang him?
They're going to hang him. We don't know why. We don't know who he is. We don't know why they're going to hang him. Beyond, notice that there are a lot of details here. And notice that the story starts with, essentially, you see the bridge, but the man, and it begins to move outward from it. So you see the man, and then you begin to see the things around the man. Of course, you saw the man, the 2 privates that were working with him, the sentinels at either end of the bridge. Beyond the sentinels, now it goes beyond them, was beyond one of the sentinels, nobody was in sight. The railroad ran straight away into a forest for 100 yards, then curving was lost into view. Doubtless there was an outpost further along. The other bank of the stream was open ground, a gentle acclivity topped with a stockade of vertical tree trunks, loopholed for rifles, with a single embouchure through which protruded the muzzle of a brass cannon commanding the bridge. Midway of the slope between the bridge and the fort were the spectators, a single company of infantry in line, at parade rest, the butts of their rifles on the ground, the barrels inclining slightly backward against the right shoulder, the hands crossed upon the stock. A lieutenant stood at the right of the line, the point of his sword upon the ground, his left hand resting upon his right. Excepting the group of 4 at the center of the bridge, not a man moved. The company faced the bridge, staring stonily, motionless. The sentinels facing the banks of the stream might have been statues to adorn the bridge. The captain stood with folded arms, silent, observing the work of his subordinates, but making no sign. Death is a dignitary who, when he comes announced, is to be received with formal manifestations of respect, even by those familiar with him. In the code of military etiquette, silence and fixity are forms of deference. Sierra, would you read?
The man who was engaged in being hanged was apparently about 35 years of age. He was a civilian, if one might judge from his habit, which was that of a planter. His features were good, a straight nose, firm mouth, broad forehead, from which his long, dark hair was combed straight back, falling behind his ears to the collar of his well-fitting frock coat. He wore a mustache and pointed beard, but no whiskers. His eyes were large and dark gray. He had a kindly expression which one would hardly have expected in one whose neck was in the neck. Evidently, this was no vulgar assassin. jury code makes provision for hanging many kinds of persons, and gentlemen are not excluded. The preparations being complete, 2 private soldiers stepped aside, and each drew away the plank upon which he had been standing. The surgeon turned to the captain, saluted, and placed himself immediately behind that officer, who in turn moved apart 1 pace. These movements left the condemned man and the surgeon standing on the 2 ends of the same plank, which spanned 3 of the cross sides of the bridge. The end upon which the civilian stood almost but not quite reached a 4th. This plank had been held in place by the weight of the captain. It was now held by that of the surgeon. At a signal from the former, the latter would step aside. The plank would tilt and the condemned man go between the 2 ties. The arrangement commended itself to its judgment as simple and effective. His face had not been covered nor his eyes bandaged. He looked a moment at his unsteadfast footing, then let his gaze wander to the swirling water of the stream racing madly beneath his feet. A piece of dancing driftwood caught his attention, and his eyes followed it down the current. How slowly it appeared to move. What a sluggish stream.
All right, you see how they're gonna do it. One man stands on one end of the plank, he's standing on the other end. What's gonna happen when one guy gets off, the end where the condemned man is standing will collapse and he will fall, breaking his neck and killing him. Delaney.
We started at
He closed his eyes.
he closed his eyes in order to fix his last thoughts upon his wife and children. The water touched to gold by the early sun. The brooding mist out of the banks and some distance down the stream. The fort, the soldiers, the piece of jerky, all that had distracted him. And now he became conscious of a new disturbance, striking through the thought of his dear ones with a sound which he could neither ignore nor understand. A sharp, distinct, metallic percussion that struck of the blacksmith's hammer upon the anvil. It had the same ringing quality. He wondered what it was, and whether immeasurably distant or nearby, it seemed both. Its recurrence was regular, but as slow as the tolling of a death knell. He awaited each stroke with impatience, and he was not why apprehensive. The intervals of silence grew progressively longer. The delays became maddening with their greater frequency. The sounds increased in strength and sharpness. They hurt his ears like the thrust of a knife. He feared he would shrink. What he heard was the ticking of his watch. Want to keep going?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just the next 2.
He unclosed his eyes and saw again the water below him. If I could free my hands, he thought, I might throw off the noose and spring into the stream. By diving, I could evade the bullets and swimming vigorously, reach the bank, take the woods, and get away home. My home, thank God, is yet outside of their lines. My wife and their little ones are still beyond the invaders' farthest enemies. As these thoughts, which have here to be set down in words, or flashed into the doomed man's brain rather than evolved from it, and the captain nodded to the sergeant. The sergeant stepped aside.
What's gonna happen now that the sergeant has stepped aside?
Will die.
Yeah, because it will collapse and he will be hanging. Okay, so it ends there. Look at the question. The guy's name is Peyton Farquhar. He has a name. You'll learn it in the first paragraph of the next. Peyton Farquhar, what is happening to him when the story begins? You know the answer to that. Just write it down. Describe the actions of the sergeant at the end of section 1 of the story. You know what that is. You can write it down. We really can't do much more than that, because now we'll go back, kind of like a flashback to find out what he is like. Did you notice anything strike you as interesting? Any detail? A lot of details. Anything strike you? Okay, I would point out, it says he has a kindly expression. One, it's on the first page, one which would have hardly expected from somebody who's being hanged. And that's usually what we say. You can hang a picture, but and yesterday you hung the picture. But they hang you today, yesterday they hanged you. You get that? That's usually the way it's expressed. Anyway, it's unexpected or ironic that the guy that they are hanging seems to be a nice guy. At least his expression looked that way. He's a planter, and he's a civilian, and he's a gentleman. All right, all those things might surprise you. Turn the page. What time of day is it? Say it again.
9.
It says in the paragraph, he closed his eyes, the water touched the goal by the early sun.
Morning.
Right. Now, why would that have been a good guess, even without looking at the text? When do they usually execute people? Wow.
No one's around, so like night.
Yeah, but, and it seemed like they, in most of the old days, it would be like at dawn. You know, I don't know why they would always pick dawn, but that's probably a reason. And what about what was he listening to? What did he hear as he stood there? Some noise kept coming into. Yeah, what was the noise?
It was banging on.
It sounded like a hammer being hitting on an anvil, but what was it? What's symbolic about his watch?
It was like counting down the seconds.
Right, his time was short. And this story kind of plays with time. Okay, Isabel, you can pick it up about Peyton Farquhar. We go back in time to see why is this guy here, who is he, and so forth.
Peyton Farquhar was a wealthy planter of the northern highly respected Iowa region. Being a slave owner and like other slave owners, a politician, he was naturally an original secessionist and ardently devoted to the Southern cause. Circumstances of an imperious nature, which it is unnecessary to relate here, prevented him from taking service with his gallant army that had fought the disastrous campaigns ending with the fall of Rome. He chafed under the inglorious restraint following for the release of his enemies. The larger life of the soldier, the opportunity for distinction, that opportunity he felt would come, as it comes to own the Lord, in wartime. Meanwhile, he did what he could. No service was too humble for him to perform in aid of the South. No adventure too perilous for him to undertake, inconsistent with the character of a civilian who was at heart a soldier, and who did in good faith and without too much qualification assented to at least a part of the frankly villainous plan that all is fair and well begun. One evening, while Farquhar and his wife were sitting on a rustic bench near the entrance to his house, a gray-clad soldier rode up to the gate and asked for a drink of water. Mrs. Farquhar was only
Should be two, T-O.
too happy to serve him with her own white hands. While she was fetching the water, her husband approached the dusty horseman and inquired if he waited for this return. The gangster returned the rifle, said the man, and are getting ready for another advance. They had reached the Albuquerque bridge, put in an order and built a stockade on the north bank. The commandant has issued an order, which is posted everywhere, declaring that any civilian caught interfering with the railroad, its bridges, tunnels, or train will be summarily hanged. I saw the order. How far is it to the Albuquerque bridge? Farquhar asked. About 30 miles. Was there no force on this side of the creek? Only a picket post half a mile out, the railroad, and a single sentinel at the end of the bridge. Suppose a man, a civilian and student of hanging, should elude the picket post and perhaps get the better of judgment by force knowledge. What could he accomplish? The soldier reflected. I was there a month ago, he replied. I observed that the flood of last winter had caused the road to make earthwood against the wooden pier at the end of the bridge. It is now dry and would burn like a tow. The lady can now crowd the water which the soldier drank. He thanked her ceremoniously and bowed to the husband and rode away. An hour later, after nightfall, he repassed the plantation, going northward in the direction from which he came. He was a fabulous guy.
All right, look at question number 3. What can we add about Peyton Farquhar? Where does he live, and describe his family?
He lived in Alabama.
Northern Alabama, lived in a plantation. That alone would tell you what about him?
He was south. He was a slave.
He lived, it was a slave owner. It says that, but that would tell you that he's wealthy. He has a plantation. They had to be run by slaves. And so he was all that. Describe his family. What?
Respected.
Yeah, old and respected. So it's like their family had been around a long time and had a lot of clout. So he's an important person in this area. All right, look at number 4. Why isn't he off fighting with the army?
He has too many slaves.
He what?
He has to take care of his plantation.
Well, the answer is a trick question in a way, because the answer is we don't know. That could be the reason, but it even tells us circumstances of an imperious nature which it is unnecessary to relate here had prevented him from taking service with the gallant army and so forth. So we don't know why he wasn't fighting, but he wasn't fighting. And he wanted to fight. He wanted to fight against the Yankees. All that's true. All right, describe the lone Confederate soldier who stops at the Farquhar farm. Who is he in reality, and why is he really at the Farquhar farm? So he and his wife are out evening, and this Confederate soldier rides by and wants water. Take it from there. Who is he in reality?
He's a northern.
Yeah, he's a federal scout. He's a Union. He's kind of like a spy. You know, he's not what he appears to be. Why was he really there in the first place?
He's trying to get information.
Yeah, what kind of information did he want? I think it's actually the other way around. He was trying to give information. What information did he give to Peyton Farquhar, who asked the questions? But what information did he give him?
Oh, where they were, or where the North was supposedly was?
Right, where was the Northern Army? And that he tells him. He asked how far it was. And he tells him, now that Peyton Farquhar is asking this Confederate, supposedly Confederate scout, and even Peyton Farquhar, well, earlier it said, what would happen to anybody that messed with the bridge? What order was on the bridge? What would happen to them? Any civilian caught interfering with the bridge would be hanged. So there was an order posted before the bridge. Any civilian messing around with this will hang you, all right? And so what does Peyton Farquhar ask about the bridge? Because he now knows where it is, or how far away it is. What does he ask? You notice he asked, suppose a man, a civilian student of hanging, should elude the picket post and get the better of the sentinel. What could be accomplished? And what's the answer to that?
The soldier said that he was there a month ago.
Yes, and what could he do to the bridge?
Burning?
He could burn it because there's a lot of wood there. So the guy rides off. So he was really a Union scout, a Northern scout. What was he there for in the first place?
To trick the South.
Right.
Burn the bridge.
To trick this guy into burning the bridge. Why would they want to do that?
So they could.
Could what?
So the South couldn't cross? Or
They want to trick him. They don't want him to burn the bridge. They want to trick him into showing up to try to burn the bridge.
so they could hang?
They can hang him. Why would they want to hang somebody?
Because they're mad at him?
They don't know him. He's just that. They kind of know of him, but they're not really angry at him. Why would they want to hang somebody?
Like an example.
Yes. They want to hang him, leave him there a few days, and anybody else want to do it, you see what's going to happen to you. So that's the plan. They tried to trick him into burning the bridge down. How do you know he did try to burn the bridge down?
He's dead.
because he's being hanged right now. So why don't we go to Aurora, part 3.
Can I go use the restroom real fast?
Yeah, we'll go on without you.
As Peyton Farquhar fell straight downward through the bridge, he lost consciousness and was as one already dead.
Now, why would he be falling down? What did they just do to him?
He stepped back and Peyton got hung.
So they're hanging him. He's in the process of being hanged, and it said he fell straight down through the bridge and lost consciousness, as if you were already dead. We'll keep going.
In this state, he was awakened. Ages later, it seemed to him by the pain of a sharp pressure upon his throat, followed by a sense of suffocation. Keen, poignant agonies.
It'd be poignant.
Poignant agonies seemed to shoot from his neck downward through every fiber of his body and limbs. These pains appeared to flash along well-defined lines of ramification and to beat with an unconceivably rapid
Periodicity.
periodicity.
Okay.
They seemed like streams of pulsating fire, heating him to an intolerable temperature. As to his head, he was conscious of nothing but a feeling of fullness, of congestion. These sensations were unaccompanied by thought. The intellectual part of his nature was already effaced. He had power only to feel, and feeling was torment. He was conscious of motion, encompassed in a luminous cloud of which he was now merely the fury heart, without material substance. He swung through unthinkable arcs of oscillation,
Mhm.
like a vast pendulum. Then all at once, with terrible suddenness, the light about him shot upward with the noise of a loud splash. A frightful roaring was in his ears, and all was cold and dark. The power of thought was restored. He knew that the rope had broken and he had fallen into the stream. There was no additional strangulation. The news about his neck was already suffocating him and kept the water from his lungs. To die of hanging at the bottom of a river. The idea seemed to him ludicrous. He opened his eyes in the dark and saw above him a gleam of light, but how distant, how inaccessible. He was still sinking, for the light became fainter and fainter, until it was a mere glimmer. Then it began to grow and brighten, and he knew that he was rising towards the surface. Knew it with reluctance, for he was now very comfortable. To be hanged and drowned, he thought, that is not so bad, but I do not wish to be shot. No, I will not be shot, that is not fair.
What happens to him?
He gets hung, then the rope breaks and he goes into the river.
So now he's underwater, but he can't drown because why?
Because of the rope tied.
The rope is tying, it's keeping the water out of his, but it's killing him too. He can't get any air in, he can't get any water in, but he can't get any air in either. So he swims to the top. But what might happen to him if he gets to the top? So he's being hanged, drowned, and shot at all at the same time. All right? I'll pick it up here. He was not conscious of an effort, but a sharp pain in his wrist apprised him that he was trying to free his hand. He gave the struggle his attention, as an idler might observe the feat of a juggler without interest in the outcome. What a splendid effort. What magnificent, what superhuman strength. Ah, what a fine endeavor. Bravo. The cord fell away. His arms parted and floated upward, the hands dimly seen on each side in the glowing light. He watched them with a new interest as first one and then the other pounced upon the noose of his neck. They tore it away and thrust it fiercely aside, its undulations resembling those of a water snake. Put it back, he thought. He shouted these words to his hands, for the undoing of the noose had been succeeded by the direct pain which he had yet experienced, by the direst pain that he had yet experienced. His neck ached horribly. His brain was on fire. His heart, which had been fluttering faintly, gave a sharp leap, trying to force itself out of his mouth. His whole body was racked and wrenched with an insupportable anguish, but his obedient hands gave no heed to the command. They beat the water vigorously with quick backward strokes, forcing him to the surface. He felt his head emerge. His eyes were blinded by the light. His chest
Teachers and
expanded.
students, please pardon the interruption for some athletic announcements. Dialectic soccer, you'll be practicing from 3:30 to 4:30 in the gym. Varsity soccer, you'll be in 3:30 to 4:30 in Coach Bo's office. Dialectic golf has been canceled, and baseball is on a schedule. Have a nice afternoon.
He felt, forced him to, he felt his head emerge. His eyes were blinded by the sunlight. His chest expanded convulsively. And with a supreme and crowning agony, his lungs engulfed a great draft of air, which instantly he expelled in a shriek. So where is he now? And he's taken the noose off. He's untied the strap, so he's free man. Sierra.
He was now in full possession of his physical senses. They were indeed
Preternaturally means basically supernaturally.
keen and alert. Something in the awful disturbance of his organic system had so exalted and refined them that they made a record of things never before perceived. He felt the ripples upon his face and heard their separate sounds as they struck. He looked at the forest on the bank of the stream, saw the individual trees, the leaves, and the veining of each leaf, saw the very insects upon them, the locusts, the brilliant-bodied flies, the gray spiders stretching their webs from twig to twig. He noted the prismatic colors in all the dewdrops upon a million blades of grass, the humming of the gnats that danced above the eddies of the stream, the beating of the dragonfly's wings, and the strokes of the water spider's legs, like oars which had lifted a boat. All these made audible music. A fish slid along beneath his eyes. He heard the rush of its body parting the water. He had come to the surface, facing down the stream. In a moment, the visible world seemed to wheel slowly round, himself the pivotal point, and he saw the bridge, the fort, and the soldiers above the bridge, the captain, the sergeant, and the two privates as executioners. They were in a silhouette against the blue sky. They shouted and gesticulated, pointing at him. The captain had drawn his pistol but did not fire. The others were unarmed. Their movements were grotesque and horrible, their forms gigantic. Suddenly he heard a sharp report and something struck the water smartly within a few inches of his head, spattering his face with spray. He heard a second report and saw one of the sentinels with his rifle at his shoulder, a loud cloud of blue smoke rising from the muzzle. The man in the water saw the eye of the man on the bridge gazing into his own through the sights of the rifle. He observed that it was a gray eye, remembered having read that gray eyes were keenest, and that all famous marksmen had them. Nevertheless, this one had missed.
Delaney, a counter swirl. So he's in the water, but now he's getting shot at as he's in the water.
The counter-swell had caught, how do you say
Farquhar.
and turned him half around. He was again looking into the forest on the bank opposite the fort. The sound of a clear, high voice and a monotonous sing-song now rang out behind him, and came across the water with a distinctness that pierced and subdued all other sounds, even the beating of the ripples in his ears. Although no soldier had frequented camps enough to know that the dread significance of that deliberate drawing, aspirated chant. The lieutenant on shore was taking part in the morning's work how coldly and with what even calm notation presaging and enforcing tranquility in the men with the accurately measured intervals fell in those cruel words.
All right, so they are now, the company is getting ready to shoot at him, all of them, like the dozen or more people that are there. Isabella.
Section company shoulder arms, ready, aim, fire. On four dived as deeply as he could, the water roared in his ears with whistle and cabaret. Yet he heard the dull thunder of the volley rising then toward the surface, met shining bits of metal, singularly flat and oscillating slowly. Some of
forest beyond. They will not do that again, he thought. The next time they will use a charge of grape, I must keep my eye upon the gun. The smoke will apprise me. The report arrives too late. It lags behind the missile. Is that missile?
Mhm.
Okay. That is a good gun. Suddenly he felt himself rolled round and round, spinning like a top. The water, the banks, the forest, the now distant bridge, fort and men, all were commingled and blurred. Objects were represented by their colors only, circular horizontal streaks of color. That was all he saw. He had been caught in a vortex and was now being whirled on with the velocity of advance
Gyration.
inauguration that made him giddy and sick. In a few moments he was flung upon the gravel at the foot of the left bank of the stream, the southern bank, and behind a projecting point which concealed him from his enemies. The sudden arrest of his motion and abrasion of one of his hands on the gravel restored him, and he wept with delight. He dug his fingers into the sand, threw it over himself in handfuls, and audibly blessed it. It looked like diamonds, rubies, emeralds. He could think of nothing beautiful which it did not resemble. The trees upon the bank were giant garden plants. He noted a definite order in their arrangement, and held the fragrance of their blooms. A strange roseate light shone through the spaces among their trunks, and the wind made in their branches the music of aloe and harps. He had no wish to perfect his escape, was content to remain in that enchanting spot until taken.
We have a minute, a little early. So what's happening? He's getting shot at, but he gets away. They shot at him with cannon, with rifles, with pistols, and now he seems to be safe. And he can see things better. He can smell things better. Let me just read. A whiz and a rattle of grape shot among the branches high above his head roused him from his dream. The baffled cannoneer had fired him a random farewell. He sprang to his feet, rushed up the sloping bank, and plunged into the forest. All that day he traveled, laying his course by the rounding sun. The forest seemed interminable. Nowhere did he discover a break in it. Not even a woodsman's road. He had not known that he had lived in so wild a region. There was something uncanny in the revelation. By nightfall he was fatigued, footsore, famished. The thought of his wife and children urged him on. At last he found a road which led him in what he knew to be the right direction. It was a wide and straight as the city street, yet it seemed untraveled. No fields border it, no dwelling anywhere, not so much as the barking of a dog suggested human habitation. The black bodies of the tree formed a straight wall on both sides, terminating on the horizon at a point, like a diagram in a lesson in perspective. Overhead, as he looked up through this rift in the woods, shone great garden stars, looking unfamiliar and grouped in strange constellations. He was sure they were arranged in some order which a secret and malign significance. The wood on either side was full of singular noises. Among once or twice and again he distinctly heard whispers in an unknown tongue. So I can't read anymore because we're not quite finished. If you're welcome to read it, we'll finish the questions tomorrow, but we're going to focus on reading. So be prepared for a quiz to page 38. It's the first 5 chapters. I don't remember. It's just page 38. Be prepared for a quiz. And you're going to stay or come back and take a quiz. All right. Where do you go? Would you tell? Are y'all going to this family?
Are you serious?
What do you think?
One advisor. I don't care.
Well, I don't want you to miss anything, but if we don't do it now, when are you going to do it?
I can do it tomorrow. I can't do it before 12:39. I can do it tomorrow at lunch.
Yeah, that would work. And still you gotta get the test.
Yeah.
This is making your grade look really bad.
Yeah, I know. I checked it the other day. It's like a 57.
Right, so we just wanna get it taken
Yeah.
care of. If I don't put a 1 in there, we'll forget. So
Yeah.
I'm putting a 1. All right, see ya. All right, see ya.